CTBT ratification by the United States would not help prevent proliferation. U.S. testing has never caused a single case of proliferation or contributed to one, nor will it ever. Proliferation's caused by belligerent or irresponsible states acquiring nuclear weapons for aggressive purposes. It's also proliferation is also caused by neighboring states or threatened states going nuclear in response. Today, because we've failed to stop Iran and North Korea in their efforts to acquire nuclear weapons, we're threatened by a global cascade of proliferation, which could virtually destroy the world. But U.S. testing had nothing to do with it. For the 4 decades that the U.S. did conduct continuing nuclear tests, 20, 30 a year, there was little proliferation. In the last 20 years, when we haven't tested at all, there's been much more proliferation. In fact, CTBT ratification by the United States will stimulate proliferation. 3 groups of states, adversarial states and rogues, will see our restraint as a weakness, and they'll accelerate their efforts to acquire nuclear weapons. Our many allies who depend upon our nuclear umbrella for their security will recognize our weakness, and they'll decide they had better join the nuclear club. Other nations all over the world, seeing America's broad nuclear weapon guardianship lapsing, will proliferate in self-defense. So it's fair to say that I believe, that U.S. ratification will be the world's strongest trigger to accelerate proliferation. And it would be a mistake also to think that CTBT as the President no doubt does, to think that CTBT ratification will be a step towards a world without nuclear weapons. This noble objective is absolutely unachievable. Nuclear weapons technology is widely known throughout the world. This is an ongoing global growth of nuclear power, making fissile material increasingly available. If large responsible states do not have effective nuclear weapons for deterrence, the world will descend into a nuclear horror and chaos. We'll be at the mercy of aggressors, rogue states, failed and failing states, terrorist groups, proxy organizations, even criminals and extortionists. So in sum, on this point of proliferation, there are no non-proliferation benefits from the U.S. ratification. Turning now to the national security aspects, ratification would severely undermine U.S. nuclear deterrence and national security. This nuclear deterrence is the cornerstone of our safety in a highly dangerous world. However, our existing nuclear weapons, designed for a totally different threat, are virtually irrelevant today in terms of our principal adversaries. More states today have nuclear weapons than ever before, and each one, except the U.S., is modernizing their arsenal with Russia and China in the lead. Fourth-generation nuclear weapons are being developed, not by us. Rogues and terrorists are seeking nuclear weapons. U.S. testing, right now today, U.S. testing is urgently required to develop the family of new design nuclear weapons we need to deter these new threats. Examples: low-yield weapons, reduced residual radiation weapons, earth-penetrating weapons, weapons capable of neutralizing biological and chemical agents, weapons with intrinsic high security so they can't be used against us. We simply must regain a credible deterrent, a deterrent which our adversaries know we have both the capability and the will to use. The CTB ratification, of course, would deny all of this. Now, I've been speaking of new nuclear weapons. Now, our existing arsenal, even though it's out of date, over age, and deteriorating, will still have to carry us through the decades it will take us to design and build new weapons. The weapons in today's arsenal, today's stockpile, may at any day show failures and problems that render them unusable, dropping by hundreds and hundreds the numbers of nuclear weapons we have. So we simply have to start testing these legacy weapons, the existing stockpile. Most vitally, our experienced human resources are virtually gone. There's hardly a person left in any of the 3 nuclear weapon labs that has ever even seen a nuclear weapon tested. And testing is essential to train their replacements, the scientists, designers, and engineers that will come along behind them. And finally, on national security, on a totally different note, ratification would seriously undermine American science. As I'm sure most of you know, the scientific method, which was uncovered several hundred years ago, has been at the heart of all mankind's science and technology steps forward. And testing is its central element. You test many, many different technologies and new approaches to see which ones are able to solve these new challenges. America's future really depends on our nuclear technology being superior to that of anyone in the world. Our scientists just simply must not be denied use of the scientific method, which is the ridiculous position we'd be in if the CTBT were ratified. So in sum, there are huge national security costs to ratification. Third, I said I'd talk about treaty competence for just a moment. The treaty competence aspects of ratification. The CTBT itself is fatally defective in quite a few areas. It's laughable. First, it bans nuclear tests, but it doesn't define these tests. Each signatory, and there are now 192 signatories, is free to create its own definition. Our U.S. definition, as you may well imagine, is one of zero yield, not even a gram of yield. So that denies us all testing. Each other nation is free to adopt its own definition, many of which will allow testing, even though it's called a comprehensive test ban. So CTBT ratification would put us at an immense disadvantage in a field where we've got to be number one. CTBT is also unverifiable. Low-yield tests, contained tests, decoupled tests, in particular decoupled tests, tests hidden in seismic activity will enable other nations to gain a huge advantage which we just can't permit. Gain if we ratified. Finally, CTBT ratification is a hopeless, feel-good gesture that carries a huge penalty which hardly anybody has noticed. The key point is that CTBT can never enter into force. This would require North Korea, Iran, Pakistan, India, Israel, Egypt, China, and the U.S. all to ratify. Each of these countries has strong, powerful reasons for not ratifying, and few would be swayed to follow the U.S. if we did. The penalty we would pay, though, if we did, is that we would be bound by international law to observe the provisions of the treaty, even though it had not entered into force. That's something we just can't do. We can't put ourselves in that position. So, in summary, the national security costs of CTBT ratification are immense, while the non-proliferation benefits are non-existent. Thank you.